Hi, my name is George Coles, and I am an avid retro video game collector.
Do a barrel roll!
I have decided to document my journeys as I grow my collection. Please join me as I share with you my finds. Welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Hi everybody and welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. On this episode we're going to do a top 10. Now the top 10, Sega Genesis Games. Or the Master System if you're outside of America. I'm going to focus on American releases because that's where I got it from, that's where I live, that's the console version I'm most familiar with. With all that being said, let's jump right into it. Number 10, The Revenge of Shinobi. And as I go down this list, you're going to see there's a kind of a common thread. A lot of these games are sequels or along the lines of a multi-layer arc. And this was one of them. I think Revenge of Shinobi and Shinobi 3 to an extent are the two best games of the series. I think Revenge of Shinobi is the absolute best of all the Shinobi games. This is one of the games if I remember correctly, and I didn't really go back and look at the release time frame on it, but if I remember correctly, it came out kind of early in the Sega Genesis life cycle, and it was one of those must-buy games right away, and I think everybody that owned a Genesis at one point or another had it. It was just a fun game, interesting gameplay, kept you engulfed in it all the way through. Ridiculously difficult. Now, the Shinobi games, and a lot of games on this list are actually somewhat difficult. We're kind of going from the era of the Nintendo, where Nintendo NES and the 8-bit games were notoriously difficult to keep you coming back to play them more and more. They were kind of bridging that here, where you were adding more gameplay to games and also kind of keeping the difficulty level up. And this is one of the games, probably one of the most difficult games to beat going through in the whole system. Now our number 9. This might come as a surprise to you, but a couple sports games actually make on this list. The first one, NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Now, I'm going to mention this here because it comes up a couple times. There are some games that are not platform-centric. In other words, they came out on Genesis and Super Nintendo and maybe other platforms as well on some of these. The reason I'm bringing this up, because some of those games, while being fantastic games, you'll see that there are some great Genesis games that were multi-platform games that didn't make this list because they were better on other platforms. And also, I take a hit on some of these when they're, because of being multi-platform games, because it's not necessarily a Genesis exclusive kind of experience. In other words, some like NBA Jam Tournament Edition, it didn't matter what console you had, you could play it. So it took a little bit of hit of that on me when we're talking about a Genesis list. And I know it's a little silly thing. If you make your list, you may be a little bit different. But everybody remembers this game. It was a fun game. It's still a fun game to play. And playing the game to make this video, get some, screen time of it. For over here, I thought it was really fun, and I still enjoy it a whole lot. I don't think that there's been many games that have touched on this and have got this style. The NBA Street Series or NFL Street, the Street Series kind of tried to do this but didn't quite capture what NBA Jam did. They even, I believe a few years back, there was an NBA Jam remake and it didn't quite get there. Games like this and NFL Blitz and NHL Hits, and there were different games, Ready to Rumble Boxing, where they were a little bit more arcade style added into a sporting game, were super fun and super common back in the day, and it was good to play them. I rather enjoyed this. This is one of my favorite games of the Genesis or any console, to be honest with you. Now our number 8, sorry, Contra Hard Corpse. Now, there's one word in this title that is so apropos, and you can see it here in what I'm playing, because I die a bunch of times. It's been a lot of years since I played this game. Contra Hard Corpse is exactly that. It's a difficult game. Much like I said with Shinobi, they were at a point in game evolution where a lot of games were ultra difficult because part of the sales point of playing a game or putting your money down, whether it was $50, $60 back in the day, was you had that replay value. You could say you only made it to level 4 today. Well, tomorrow you try to make it to level 5. And then the next day you try to make it to level 6. And then you'd get a cheat code, or a friend would tell you a trick to beat a certain boss, and you would do that so you could make it to level 7. So it was all replayability is why they were so difficult. The Contra games are just fun. I mean, I enjoy them. They have a special place in my heart. I like Contra Hard Corps. Super C is probably my favorite of the series, but Contra Hard Corps was such a good game. It's such an interesting playthrough that I think it deserved a spot on this list. Now, before I go into our number 7, let me reveal it, and then you'll see why. Our number 7 is Mortal Kombat 2, and before I start talking about it, let me put on my Raiden hat. Obviously, this game, Mortal Kombat influenced so much, whether it be just the rating system, whether it be the arcade style, whether it be the fighting game system, the more adult-oriented game system. This game, to me, and like I said with NBA Jam, multi-platform game. It came out on Super Nintendo and Genesis. I think the Genesis version is superior. I think it's superior by a lot. Now, it was kind of a weird thing, because for Street Fighter, I find the Street Fighter series is superior on Super Nintendo, whereas Mortal Kombat, I find their series is superior on Genesis. Kind of weird how that played out. I always thought that was weird, like almost they tied each other to the systems. I mean, who doesn't love the Mortal Kombat games? I mean, who doesn't love Mortal Kombat 2? Mortal Kombat 1 was a really good game, but Mortal Kombat 2 is where they went from a good game to a great game. And this is, to me, still, I want to say this is one of the quintessential Mortal Kombat games. There's some really good entries. Mortal Kombat 10, 11 have been really good. I want to say 7 was excellent. A lot of it gets muddled because there are 11 games now, so it's hard to remember exactly which game did what. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was an amazing game. I mean, there's a lot of amazing games in the series, but this was the jumping off point. This was the game that created a frenzy. This was the game that all your friends would come over to play, and you would play for hours and hours on end, trying to get the animalities or the babe-alities or whatever alities were rumored to be, the rumored nude-alities and all that other craziness that went along with this game back in the day, and all just the fever pitch and the excitement it caused. It's such a fantastic game, too. It's still fun. I still think this is a fun fighting game. If this were to come out today and there was no Mortal Kombat 2, I think it still would be a hit because the style of gameplay is so good in it that I think it still transfers well. Now, with that being said, to a different kind of fighting game, our number 6, Streets of Rage 2. And that's basically, let me take my Raiden hat off now that we're not talking about Mortal Kombat. Streets of Rage 2 is a beat-em-up game. And to me, again, much like I said, there's a lot of these games that are Part 2s, Part 3s, Part 4s. This, to me, was the best of the Streets of Rage series. I like this game. I like the gameplay. It's simplistic, but not too simplistic that it's boring. There's a kind of line that they had to tread where you only had 5 or 6 moves, and yes, you spent most of a level beating up villains that were basically the same over and over again. But I think Streets of Rage is one of the games that got this style of gameplay really right. Double Dragon's another one that they really got and understood how to make a side-scrolling beat-em-up a good game. And that, to me, sold this. To me, I think Streets of Rage is another one of the games that was a seller for the system. I mean, games like Shinobi, Streets of Rage, and some of the others that I'm going to talk about later are why you would want to buy a Genesis instead of buying a Super Nintendo back in the day. Because they had hits like this. They had games that were so good that you had to play them. Every gamer at that time had to play this game, whether they had a Genesis or Super Nintendo. If you didn't have a Genesis, you had to go to one of your friends that had a Genesis and either play it or rent it from your local video store so you could play this game. And it was just one of those games that, to me, when I think of Sega Genesis, this is one of the games that comes up on the top of my head. Now, our number 5. This game is one of the games that proves that not all licensed games are trash. And that's Aladdin. There's a really good version of this for Super Nintendo as well, which is, again, why it takes a little bit of a hit here, because I think I've played both versions. I've played them both all the way through, and I can't really tell that there's much of a difference. In a lot of the games that are on both systems, you can't tell much of a difference too. So to me, I mean, I'm not saying it knocks down the gameplay value. Either one is a fantastic get, but it's not an exclusively great game on Genesis, if you follow what I'm saying. In other words, if the Super Nintendo version was trash, it wouldn't hurt this as much. I think it's one of those games. It's one of these games where a lot of my friends didn't like it because it was when I was a kid. By the time Aladdin came out, I was a teenager, and a lot of my friends, of course, being a teenager, are also teenagers, so they don't watch Disney movies anymore. Which I always thought was like, okay, whatever, you still watch this movie. Everybody watched Aladdin, everybody watched Lion King. Anyone that grew up in my era, if they told you they didn't watch these Disney movies, they're flat out lying to you. So, you knew the property, you knew what you were getting into, you knew it was going to be a fun game, and it did well. I love the graphics of this game. I love the style of the artwork that they used here. I thought it was a fantastic jumping off point. I think it's a great game, and not even just, if Aladdin wasn't a movie and this game stood alone, I think it would be considered an all-time classic in itself. I really enjoy this game. One of my favorites on the system, as you can see by where I place it on this list. I think it's one that really doesn't get talked about as much, and it could be because of the Disney reasons, because there hasn't been remakes and there hasn't been in compilations that people kind of forget about it. But I think it's one of those games that you shouldn't sleep on. If you see this at your local retro gaming store or at a yard sale and you're a Genesis collector, definitely pick this up. It is a game that is going to be worth every penny you pay for it. Now, next up, our number 4. It's a game that was immortalized in, I want to say, Clerks, actually. Was it Mallrats? One of the Kevin Smith movies. Either way. It's a game that we all know and love, and the second sports game on this list, NHL 94. Now, there have been NHL games that have been really good. There have been games with better graphics. But I don't think any NHL game quite caught the mechanics and got the mechanics as right as they did in this 94 game. And I think it's a fantastic example of what EA used to be compared to what they are now. Now you kind of get minor upgrades yearly, and a roster update is basically what you're paying your $60 for, whereas back in this day, and I don't know if they still do this or not, I know they had two teams working. So once you got done developing NHL 94, you were working on NHL 96. So you had 2 full years to get the game ready, which I think they don't do that anymore, which is why we only see minor upgrades. So you would see from year to year, from 93 to 94, massive improvements. Now, sometimes the new things they would implement weren't improvements, and that's kind of why I think 94 was the peak of the series, at least in this generation. I think it's one of those games that I know a lot of people that don't like hockey, that never played hockey, never watched hockey, love this game and bought this game because of how fun it is to play. And it's indicative to how the game is played. It plays like a real hockey game. There's skill needed, there's toughness needed, there's grit and determination that you need to do. You need to juggle your lines. You can turn that off, of course. I don't. I like the idea of the strategizing. Do I put my first line against their first line, etc., etc. So you kind of get an experience, maybe not graphically that makes you think you're in an NHL game, but you get a gameplay that feels like you're in a real NHL game. And like I said, I think this was, for this generation, the best NHL game there was. And there's other NHL games that I probably rate as good as this, but I don't know that I would rate anything better. And that's a big statement coming from this. And like I said with other games that are multi-platformers, this also came out on Nintendo 64, but I feel, and again, this is some of this is just me, I feel like the Genesis controller was more conducive to what you wanted to do with this game. It felt more natural than the Super Nintendo controller when playing the game, in my opinion. Now, our number 3. If you watch any of these, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Castlevania series. And it's kind of gotten a push in recent years. It's coming back to prominence, but it wasn't talked about for a long time, and that's Castlevania Bloodlines. I love this game. I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best in the series. To me, Castlevania Bloodlines, Sympathy of the Night, Rondo of Blood, all stalwarts, all games that I love and that they are so quintessential for the Castlevania games. I can't really tell you without having to think hard a Castlevania game I don't like. And this is right along the lines. This is the quintessential what you would expect from a Castlevania game. It's difficult, it's challenging, there's puzzles, there's a learning curve that you have to have. You can't just go into this game willy-nilly and dominate it. You have to actually understand what you're doing and pace yourself and not rush fully in some places. And there's secrets and there's everything you love about Castlevania is in this game. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's one of the better games of the system. For a lot of years it was overlooked, and I want to say Metal Jesus, but I could be wrong. I believe Metal Jesus or some other YouTuber, a popular YouTuber, put it out as one of the games that was underrated for the Genesis, and then people started picking back up and looking at it and buying it again and going, wow, this really was a fantastic game, which I'm glad that happens. I like when that happens. I know a lot of people don't like in the retro gaming community when someone, Metal Jesus, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that he does, because I love his videos when he does this. If Metal Jesus comes out in like a Hidden Gems video, it skyrockets the price of some of these games. Because everybody rushes out because they trust what he's saying. Because usually, he's pointing you in the right direction. And I love that he does that. I love that he highlights these games that fly under the radar. Because sometimes, it's a game I forgot about. Or I may not even known. There's hundreds and hundreds of games released for every single system. You're not going to know every one of them. And Castlevania Bloodlines is kind of the forgotten Castlevania game for a long time. And I'm so happy it's on the Castlevania collection that you could get on all your modern platforms if you want to play it that way. But also, if you want the original experience of plugging the card into the Genesis, it's still a fantastic experience. I highly recommend the game. Now, our number 2, probably the most controversial pick on this list, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. And I know. There's a whole documentary series about what Michael Jackson allegedly did. And I know, if it's true, he's a monster. I fully accept that point. But this game to me was such a great game and so much fun to play. So it was different. You played as Michael Jackson and you could do his dance moves and it played his music in the background. And if this was at the time when Michael Jackson was the biggest star in the world. I mean, people of this generation don't have a star the magnitude of Michael Jackson. Imagine Justin Bieber times 50. Michael Jackson could not leave his house without 100 people being around him. That's how famous and how popular and how much of pop culture he was. And he made some of the best music that the world's ever heard. And I'll stand by that for the rest of my life. No matter what he did, he actually did that as well. He could be a monster, but he could also have been a musical genius. And this game, which from everything I've heard and all the backstories I've heard, Michael Jackson was a big time video gamer. And this was something that he put his stamp of approval on. He made sure that this game played like you would. You search for, basically you're searching for children that the bad guys have kidnapped. And it's just a great game. And it's one of the games that I know it's risen up in price. I think it's like a $40 or $50 game at this point. But it's one of those games that you kind of have to play if you want to get the authentic Genesis experience, because it's one of the quintessential Genesis games, in my opinion. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, Sega Genesis, they go together like jelly and peanut butter, to me. Now, before we get to our number 1, we do a little thing here on our top 10s called the best of the rest. Basically, some games that were thought of for the list but didn't quite make it for whatever reason. Now, first up, we have Ghouls and Ghosts. Everybody knows this, another side-scrolling, brutally difficult game that if you could beat it, you were considered a good gamer. And if you couldn't, you kept trying until you could, which made you a better gamer. I thought another one of these fantastic games for this system that just felt short of the rest. Also, Golden Axe. Another Sega proprietary game. Out of all these, it may not have aged as well as most of these. Playing it back a little bit, it does get repetitive more quickly than some of these do. However, it doesn't mean it's not a fun game. You get different power-ups, different level-ups. The levels are fun and interestingly built. The bad guys are interesting that you fight. The different animals you can ride is cool. It's still a really fun game, but to me, it's one of the games that's not held up as well as others. But still, gameplay-wise, it's fantastic. Last but not least, on our best of the rest, before we get into our number 1, Phantasy Star 4. A lot of people, when they talk about RPG series, they bring up Final Fantasy, they bring up whatever other series they talk about, Ultima, different ones throughout the years that people have loved, Persona, which is a different kind of RPG, but a lot of times the Phantasy Star series kind of gets overlooked, and I think that's criminally underrated in my opinion. That this series, it was actually really good. I believe the first 2 games came out on the Master System, and then, or actually first 3, and then we got Phantasy Star 4 on Genesis. And I believe that all 3 of the first 3 eventually ported over to Genesis as well. Phantasy Star 4 to me is my favorite, other than Phantasy Star Online, which was a fantastic game. I'm still holding out hope that we get Phantasy Star Online 2 in America at some point. But this game, it was just so much fun, and it's got all the elements that you expect from a lot of RPGs. It set a lot of what we think an RPG is comes from a game like this, comes from Phantasy Star 4, comes from these old 16-bit era games. And Genesis isn't looked at as a great system for RPGs. Nintendo having games like Chrono Trigger, having games like the 2 Final Fantasies that came out in North America, the Secret of Mana, different games on that system kind of made it the system to go to if you want a good RPG. However, if you have a Genesis and you're an RPG fan, this is definitely a must-buy. Now, with all that being said, if you agree with my list, if you think I put something up too high, something down too low, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your favorite Genesis game is. I know we're not all going to have the same list. Everybody's is going to be a little bit different. But let me know down here. Tell me what your favorite was. From all that, our number 1, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Nothing says Sega Genesis more than Sonic the Hedgehog. He was the icon of the system. He was the mascot for the system. He's the guy that everybody looked to carry the system going into the future. And much like I said with Streets of Rage 2, Mortal Kombat 2, Revenge of Shinobi, a lot of these, again, a lot of sequels in this series, or in this list. This game took what the original did and turned it up to 11. It made not that the first game was bad, but in comparison, in retrospect, when you put the first game on and then you put on the second game is so much further, so light years better. I'm not making that as a knock, because the first Sonic the Hedgehog is still a fantastic game as well. But they put so much effort into making this game great. To me, it is the quintessential Sega Genesis game. It's a game that if you have a Sega Genesis and you're a video game collector, you cannot say you have a Sega Genesis system if you don't have this game. This is a game that everybody should have in their collection, that everybody should play at some point in their life. That, to me, no matter where we go, 30, 40, 50 years from now, no matter where video games go, this game is going to stand the test of time. It's much like Super Mario for the NES. It's one of those games that just so cements itself as a great quality video game experience that you have to play it at some point. And I think that's why it's my number 1. I love the game. I've played through it millions, or not millions, obviously, but probably at least 100 times, if not more, over the years. I've played it in the original iteration. I've played it on compilations. It's usually whenever I get a Sega compilation, like the one that came out for PlayStation 3 a few years back, or when I get the Sega Genesis Mini, it's going to be one of the first games I play and play all the way through, because I want to see how they play and how that gameplay stacks up against the original, because that's usually the barometer how good the Sonic game is. If the Sonic game's good, then the rest of the games on the set are going to be good. If the Sonic game's not good, chances are they're not good ports anywhere else on the set. So, to me, again, it is the game that made the Genesis what it was. It is the perfect example of Sega at its peak. Now, with all that being said, again, if you agree with the list, if you think I put a game up too high, too low, let me know what you think. If I forgot a game altogether, let me know. Again, and I'd like to hear from you. If you're watching this, please just drop a comment. Say, hey, my favorite Sega game or Genesis game was Sonic the Hedgehog. My favorite game, Sega Genesis Games, was Aladdin. Whatever it may have been. Your favorite game may not have been on this list. You might have liked Vector Man. You might have liked Lion King, which was a really good game. I mean, there's a lot of really fantastic games that didn't make this list, so it's quite possible your favorite Sega Genesis game isn't on my list. Let me know what you think, though. I'd like to hear from you guys, hear what your opinions are. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Top 10.